Well, there definitely are puzzles in life. This is difficult, and you just can't take it apart. But there is a way of doing it. I don't know if you can see this. It's challenging. It really is. But there is a way. Like I can't get it. See, it's hooked. Do you see this? It's pretty well hooked here. But there is a way of doing it where you can actually get it so it comes apart. I can't find it right now, but we will work on it until we get it. Okay. Boy, this is taking a while. And that's the thing, it takes a while. And sometimes in the Bible, there's parts of it that are big questions. It's a puzzle. The verse that we're going to talk about is Mark. Oh, look. Oh, there it is. There's a verse that we're coming to is Mark 13:14. Mark chapter 13, verse 14. That's been said. It's the hardest verse in Mark in all 16 chapters. As a matter of fact, it's been said it's the hardest verse in the Bible. I don't know about that. I kind of think I know what it means, but I'm not sure. But it really is a puzzle. Like, just want to scratch your head here. It's really challenging. And so, yep, it's this thing called, can you read this? It's an abomination of desolation. Those are big words, aren't they? If you're young, can you say it with me? I'm going to say it slow. Ready? Say this. Abomination. I can't hear you. No, just abomination of, that word's simple, desolation. Say desolation. Sorry if you're older and you're listening. It's okay. We get it, Gordon. Abomination of desolation. Now, this is what Jesus said. When you see the abomination of desolation, or another way of saying it is abomination that causes desolation. By the way, let's just define those words really quick. Abomination is something that's awful, disgusting, detestable, like you detest it. It's abhorrent. It's repugnant. It's something that you hate. You say, those are really big words, sorry. But some of the older ones are listening to this too. That's awesome. Something you really hate. Abomination is something that's just despicable, disgusting. Yuck, you want to vomit. God has things that he wants to vomit over. He doesn't get sick. He can't get sick. But there's things that turns his stomach, like he wants to puke, Abomination. And by the way, the word abomination is used a lot in the Old Testament, especially the big thing, drum roll. Can you hear that? The big thing that are abominable, things that are abomination, are idols. Over and over, that's the abomination that's before God. Now, there's other things also, but idols are the main one in the Old Testament, all the way through the Bible. So abomination of desolation. Desolation means like empty, waste. Like if I leave my house right here and I just leave it and it burns down, it's desolate. It's empty. It's wasted. It's empty. It's gone. It's no good. It's like, yeah, just desolate. It's wasted. All right. So an abomination of desolation. Now, that phrase, by the way, this is very important. Jesus actually said in Matthew and in Mark, he says right here that it has to do with Daniel's prophecy. In some of the translations, it actually uses that word Daniel, from Daniel, especially in Matthew. So Daniel is a wonderful book. I love the book of Daniel. Daniel in the lion's den, if you know that story, and Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego, and the fiery furnace, and the big image of Nebuchadnezzar. And there's all sorts of great stories there. I love it. It's 12 chapters of rich stuff, and a lot of it is prophesying. Remember what prophecy is? It's like looking into the future, like a telescope. Oh, wow, cool. You can see in the future, and this is what Jesus is doing. He's giving a prediction. Now, it's used 4 times in chapter 8, 9, 11, and 12, especially 9, 11, and 12. And I think this passage, when he says, when you see the abomination that causes desolation, that's in chapter 9 particularly, I think. Chapter 12 is the one that literally says abomination of desolation. But let me go on. When you see the abomination that causes this desolation standing where it or the word could be he. I'm not going to go into the Greek, but it's like, for you guys who want to hear it, it's used as a masculine thing, which he is used instead of neuter, N-E-U-T-E-R, I think is how you spell that, neuter, which means it. It's mainly, it could be either or, but I think it's mainly he. So some person or something. When you see the abomination that causes desolation, standing, what's standing? It sounds like something standing. Of course, a statue can stand. These little figures are standing. And if you remember, Jesus right now is talking to sorry, Peter. Yeah, Peter, I just knocked down Peter. Peter, James, John, and Andrew, he's sharing with them because they asked him these questions. In my opinion, this right here is where he's answering the question about the temple coming down. Remember, they said, oh, the buildings are awesome. He said, every stone's going to be gone. They're going to be knocked down. This is when he's saying it. When you see this is that sign that he's talking about. That's when it's going to happen. So, and he even says, let the reader understand. And by the way, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, those books, especially those, or the others too, were written so that it could be talked, like read to a congregation. And that means he spoke it out loud. They didn't all have each, turn into your Bibles. They didn't have Bibles. There's not many of them. So this letter right here was written by Mark. It went to the congregation in Rome, to the churches in Rome, or church in Rome, probably only one. And they read it out loud, and you hear it out loud. And this is really to be discussed out loud. It's proclaimed. And when you see the abomination, he says, causes desolation, standing where it or he does not belong, something doesn't belong where? In the temple. And that's what he's talking about. Remember, the temple is going to come down. Let the reader understand, then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Now, we're not going to talk about that yet, probably in the next video. But let's talk about this abomination, desolation. What is this? Well, I kind of mentioned it a little bit, but here's the point on this real quick. Jesus is speaking, and he talks about something that's going to cause the temple, and by the way, I believe, Jerusalem, the city, the holy city of Jerusalem. He mentions it here. This is about 30 AD. AD means Anno Domini, which means the year of our Lord, talking about Jesus' birth. Anytime after Jesus' birth is Anno Domini, AD. We live this year in Anno Domini. Whatever year that is that you're listening to this video is that year that it's AD. We're living in AD times. It's after birth, 2000 and whatever, 2000 years something after Jesus' birth. Now the BC, for the younger ones, you know what BC stands for? Can you tell me? BC means before Christ, before his birth. So we have Jesus being born here. Can you see that? Jesus was born here. And I think it was 35 years old at this time. He was. BC is everything before Christ, everything outside of, after, not outside, after the birth of Jesus, called AD. Anno means, well, if you know Spanish, año, como, like, ¿cuántos años tienes? Like, how many years you, anno means, is Latin for year. Domini sounds like dominion, and that's what it is, the dominion, the dominant one, the Lord. So he says he's talking, and he's talking about something that's going to happen, because he says, when you see, when who sees? Them. He's talking to them. I don't think he's talking to us right here. He's answering their questions. When he says, when you see, he's talking to them. He's not talking to people nowadays. This is not something in the future way down here, like people think that this is the Antichrist here. In my opinion, he's really answering the question, and especially these next verses, the next, I don't know, so many verses, to verse 20, like 21 or whatever, all the way up there, maybe 20. It goes, he's talking about what you're supposed to do, and this is what's going to happen. He's warning them, he's preparing them, he's prophesying and predicting what's going to happen. He died, in my opinion, at 30 AD, and I'm not going to tell you that until we get to the death of Jesus, and we'll talk more in detail on when it happened. But then this is when the abomination of desolation, I believe, happened. When General Titus came in, there was a war between 66 AD and 70. Let's see, 66, 67, 68, 69, 70. It was a long war. And then when Titus actually, by the way, the armies surrounded, and this is what Luke said in a parallel passage in Luke chapter 21. The armies of Rome, he said, when you see these armies, by the way, Luke didn't mention the abomination of desolation. He just said, when you see the armies. I think it's because he's really writing to Gentiles mainly, and they didn't know the phrase abomination of desolation. He didn't use that like Daniel said it in the Old Testament. The Jewish people knew what that phrase was. So he didn't use it. He just said, hey, when you see the armies surround Jerusalem, and that happened in 70 AD. By the way, they kind of came in and they were there was some trouble there. And the Jewish people, bless their hearts, were rising up and really revolting and causing problems. It was trouble for year after year. It was sort of a war that went on for a little while. But you know, the Roman army kind of turned around and they didn't really want to destroy the city, and they started moving out. But they were attacked from behind, I think, from the Jewish people. The zealots and others, they started fighting against them. So they turned around and came back and they said, burn down the city. Bam! The temple was destroyed. That's what Jesus predicted. Remember, all these stones are going to come down. Not one stone is going to be laid upon another. All those, that beautiful temple that Herod the Great had built. And Jerusalem went down. And in my opinion, it was a judgment of God. I also believe that it's because they rejected, not all of them, but a lot of the Jewish people rejected Jesus, the Messiah, their Messiah. It was a judgment against them. 40 years after Jesus died, God got him back. Now, I don't think it was just them. I think it's way deeper than that. He died for me. He died for my stupid sins. Yep, stupid sins. And so Jesus Christ, the Messiah, died for not just the precious Jewish people. He also died for us, the Gentiles, and everyone else. So it was bigger than that. But he did really bring down that city. And there's more reasons why I did that, but that was 70 AD. Now, what is this back here? Do you notice this? I have like the dates 167 and 168. Really, 168 should be over this way, because if you go back 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, all the way back, all the way back here, BC, then you get the time of a guy named Antiochus. Oh, I know this. I've said it over and over. Antiochus. I know it. Antiochus. And then Epiphanes. This guy came in and he attacked not Herod's temple, but the temple that was up at that time. He came and he took their altar, the burnt offering, where they put burnt offerings, and he put an image. First, he put an image of Zeus. And by the way, I made a mistake in my last video. I believe it was the last video. Zeus is not a Roman god. Jupiter is a Roman god. Juno is a Roman god. Mars, Venus, those are the Roman gods. I said Zeus was a Roman. It was a Greek god. And this Greek guy came in and he put the statue of Zeus in the temple of God. You're not supposed to have any statues. There's only one God. That's idols. That's an idol. See, abomination. Like I said before. Are you with me? He put a temple, an idol statue in there, and he worshipped it in the temple of God. Ugh. He also, guess what? Ugh. He put a pig. That was an insult. On that burnt offering altar, and he sacrificed a pig. He took a pig and killed it right there, instead of like the other animals. And that's God said, you know, it's an unclean animal. In your face, insulted him. He also took scrolls, the beautiful Bible, the scrolls, and burnt it. He also renounced Judaism. He was cutting it down. But that's when what's called the Maccabean revolt happened, where they rose up and beat him and beat the king and beat them and pushed him out. And that was called the Maccabean revolt. And by the way, there's a book, a couple books, Maccabeans, that's actually written, and it tells all that stuff that happened in history. So now, that is kind of like what happened when he's talking about the abomination of desolation. But he can't be talking about that one, because it happened, what, 200 years, almost 200 years or so before Christ came and spoke this. It already happened in the past. So we can mark that one out, that's not what he's talking about there. That's the first occasion. Now, either he's talking about an abomination of desolation that happened at this point, 70 AD, or he's talking about something way in the future that has not yet happened, like a rebuilt temple and there's an Antichrist coming and all that. Well, I think there's too much evidence, in my opinion, at this time. I mean, really, in one way, it could be multiple times. Like God does a prophecy, he says something, and it's this and this and this. Sometimes it can be literal multiple times. Maybe it was in the future as well, but I don't think so. I've read this over and over and over and over. And my understanding when he says, when you see the abomination that causes desolation, standing where it does not belong, let the reader understand, then let those who in Judea flee to the mountains. And if it is God coming back, and if it's, Jesus Christ coming back, you can't flee from the judgments of God. Of course, this is judgment of God, but it's really using the armies of Rome. God does use people for his judgment. He used Babylon in the Old Testament. He used Assyria for the Old Testament. He used Egyptians. He used various ones, judgments of God, to punish and discipline his people. In this case, he's disciplining his people. And because the Christians believed this, they heard this and remembered it, when the armies started coming in really intensely, they left. They left Jerusalem. And they went to a place called Pella. Eusebius in the 3rd and 4th century mentioned that. Pella, by the way, if you remember this, I don't know if you can remember, like if you've been with me for a while, you kind of know some of this. But let me draw a map real quick. So you've got, let's say, I'll draw this. Here's Israel right here, okay? And here's what's that? Do you remember? There's the Sea of Galilee. There's a Jordan River right there. Here's the Jordan River. That's Jordan River. Then you have the Dead Sea that comes down like this. That's pretty good, not too bad. This Jordan River, this is Jerusalem. Now, when the army surrounded the city, can you see that circle right there surrounding Jerusalem? The Christians went maybe different places. Maybe they fled. Like, oh, that's what Jesus remembered. The Jewish people, for the most part, did not. They actually went into the city thinking, oh, this is God's holy city. He's going to protect it. No, he's going to judge it. Anyway, they went out, they crossed Jordan like that, and they went, this is Perea down here, and they went to a place, I've actually talked about this before in my videos. They went to a region called Decapolis, and Pella is about 5 miles outside of Jerusalem right there, Pella, and that's where they went. Now, I don't think that's the only place, maybe, but this is a major place that the Christians fled, and they got protected because they listened to Jesus. People who don't listen to Jesus, you're not safe. You need to follow Christ. All right, so, wow, there's so much here. I hope you got it. So we have the abomination of desolation, whatever that means. And then we talked about like the past one where the Romans, the Greek guy came in. By the way, here's polytheism of Rome. These are some of it's Jupiter, Juno, Neptune, Minerva, Mars, Venus, and Apollo. These are gods or deities. Can you see that word over there? Deities. These are the gods of the Romans. Well, they were, pagan religions, and they were worshiping gods. But the abomination of desolation happened in Antiochus, in the past. I don't think he's talking about that. So that's why I have that picture of Jesus pointing in the future, because he said, when you see, this already happened. They know about that. That's not what he's talking about. And I think it really happened right there, especially because of the verses coming up here. So Jesus is, sharing all this stuff. Remember, this is a puzzle. I mean, it's challenging. I could be wrong on what I believe here. Some things you just kind of know that is, oh, look, I put the puzzle back together. See right here? It's like, can't get it. But this is a puzzling thing. But I think I, through study and research and hearing opinions of others, I think that is talking about literally the time where the judgment of God came on Jerusalem, and that's that time. I don't think it's something in the future. Could be double, could have happened again, maybe Antiochus and that and this, the past, the present for them, and the future that hasn't even happened yet. I think it already happened because of these next verses. I'm not going to keep repeating that. So I think you got it. Thank you for listening. God bless you.